All right, welcome to this CMC podcast entitled "Are Bowlines Safe Enough for Rope Rescue?" So they are, I don't know, are bowlines safe enough for rope rescue? Pre talk of this show with LeRoy, we got his opinion. LeRoy, what are your thoughts? Are bowlines safe enough for rope rescue?
I think that if you're asking if the question you're referencing or the question you're asking me is, do they work? The answer is yes. And that's where I'm going to leave my answer.
Come on. You can expound a little bit.
I do. I'll be honest with you. I have some reservations only from the standpoint that I have seen them tied incorrectly more often than they have been tied correctly. And this kind of references back to your study that you had done for eiders, the boutique bowlines thing, where it's not all that hard to tie the thing wrong. And wind up with something that you think is going to hold. And in training with an unnamed organization, made things. Let's just refer to it was a good thing that the belay guy was not asleep at the switch and it was early in the day. Kind of catch my drift.
Now, I'm picking up what you're putting down. We talked about that last podcast too. Where do you put the best guy on the scene? On the belay.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe should have been tying knots too, but all right, we'll circle back around to that. Wayne, what is your thought? Are bowlines safe enough for rope rescue?
Yeah, I think they are. I took Reed's class over 20 years ago. Obviously, that's what he does. I never once felt unsafe. I mean, I've been doing some math with this stuff, even your math, Kelly. And remember that your math was done on T-rated rope.
Yeah,
not
totally.
Not like a G11, right? So the results would be different. So mathematically, I think they're fine. Do I think there are better choices? Yeah, I do. But if you were to hang me on one right now, I would have zero reservations about it.
All right, fair enough. We'll go around the table. John, what do you think? Are bowlines safe enough for rope rescue?
They are, but kind of the same thing that Wayne said. When I first learned on those, I can remember the training officer saying that the bowline was the king of all knots. Yeah. Learned him before that in the Boy Scouts with stupid tricks like, have your arms broken and you need to tie a loop around you. And a bowline you can pretty well tie with one hand, and I'm not sure you can with a figure eight and a bite and stuff. So, yeah, I think that they're safe, but I think that there's better options, both easier to recognize that they're tied correctly, easier to make sure that they're easier to tie correctly or easier to recognize, kind of the same thing, and that are actually stronger options, and then the final reason, and the reason why we went away from them, because we originally were using bowlines at CMC, was just the need for a safety knot. And obviously, if you were using a long tail, it's never going to come through. But that additional requirement tended to slow everything down, where the knot itself might be faster. But having to tie the safety knot slowed it down. So, yeah, is it safe? Yeah. Is it the best choice? No, I don't think so. But one real advantage, I'm sure somebody will say it, is if they get all loaded up, they're sure easier to untie.
Yeah, definitely. My take, are bowlines safe enough for rope rescue? Is yes. Like I would tie my shoes with a bowline if I could figure out how, but I haven't figured that one out. So if anybody's got an answer, I would love to know how. So what makes a rescue knot a good knot? I thinking back to my the Fire One kind of time, or even Boy Scouts, easy to tie, easy to remember, hard to get wrong in the cold or the dark, easy to untie after loading, which the 8 admittedly does not, and secure and strong. So I think the 8 meets all of those requirements except easy to untie after extreme loading.
Kelly, I think you missed one thing too, and that's easy to recognize.
You know what? You're right. I did.
Easy to recognize. I think it's a big one, right? There has to be people that can look at something and say, yeah, that's right. Now, would you see the same thing with a figure 8, right? I mean,
sure.
Figure 9, at first glance, if you're not paying attention, can look pretty similar. Right?
Totally. If you get an 8
in a class where a guy has had an overhand, right? And you go, hey, hang on a second, something doesn't look right there. So it's not exclusive to bowlines, obviously.
Yeah, no.
No, but if you mess up, if you screw up tying an 8, you're either going to end up with an overhand or a figure 9, which either of those are I think probably also adequate as a rope rescue knot. I think the overhand on a bite we don't use just because it's like deadly to untie after it's been loaded. Is that the general thought on that? I think it's stronger than an 8. It's been a while since I've looked at the numbers, but I thought an overhand on a bite was stronger than an 8. But you just couldn't untie it after even loading it with your body weight or something.
That would make sense. It's not.
I can't remember, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's definitely harder to untie. I have
our list, and it's not on our list. But you were probably right, Kelly. Definitely harder to untie.
Yeah. So I guess it's really a balancing act of what you want in a good rescue knot. And I remember a long time ago, some salty old guy said, "All right, look, kid, firemen tie 8s, rescue men they tie Bowlines." I was like, man, that kind of stuck with me.
Did you tell him he was wrong?
I didn't know any better at the time, but I'd agree with him more than ever now. But I think guys who are nerdy for rope stuff are comfortable with the bowline and with its limitations and being able to tie it properly. But I think it's a fine rescue knot, and actually, where I work, we use a double longtail bowline for tying in at the end of the rope for everything we do: Stokes basket, pick off, single rescue or lower, you name it. So I started, bringing all of the anchor side bowlines to the table, and they told me to, go pound sand because bowlines were unsafe. And I had to highlight that it was the same piece of rope we're talking about here. Like on one end, we're hanging 2 people on a bowline. That's fine. On the other end of the same piece of rope, we're tying a bowline, and that's not fine. And they didn't like that logic very much, and I had to wait 10 years to ride them out till we were able to play with bowlines again. But there we are. So aside from the mistying thing, one of the things I thought interesting was that Wayne and LeRoy, you guys mentioned the eiders thing. I did a presentation at 2019 eiders called Boutique Bowlines. I forget where 2019 was at, but where was? Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, heck yeah. It was interesting. There was very little testing, strength-wise, done on anything other than like a standard bowline, which I thought was pretty unique. Why is that? Like, why is that? Just, CMC hasn't done any crazy bowline testing, have we?
Well, we've done some. Cedric did some on, and I think it came back to the question that had come up. I think it was at an instructor meeting, but I know for sure it came up in a class with the bowline on a coil, or Portuguese bowline, or whatever you want to call it this week.
Yeah.
And using that as an anchor point, or using it like we use it in the on the litter, right?
Sure.
For vertical litter work. And the question did come up: how strong is this thing actually?
Right.
And a lot of it, we all know, comes down to D to D ratio. Diameter of the rope to diameter of the object. So yep. Cedric did some testing, and I think he did it as a 3 sigma test, if I remember correctly. So 5 samples.
Right.
And the bollard size, John, do you remember the size of the smallest bollard we have at the shop?
1.5 inches.
And so that's what he did it on now to get a...
No, I take it back.
I thought we had one smaller than that.
I think there might be a 1 inch. I know when we did the testing on efficiencies on things with diameters, we had 1.5 inches, but I think there is a 1 inch solid bollard as well.
Yeah, which I think got us as close as we could get to the rails on a litter.
Right, fair enough.
The structural rails.
Sure.
And they came up. They're ridiculously strong. As that Portuguese bowline, or bowline on a coil. 6,400 seems to stick in my mind.
So I had way different results when I tested the Portuguese bowline, and it was around like shackles. They were just I don't even know what they are, 4-ton work and load shackles or something, 3/4 inch shackles. Man, it slipped at 2,000 pounds every single time. The knot would slip towards whatever side did not have the tail coming out of it. And then it eventually collapsed onto that anchor. For me, the way I tied it would be the right side anchor if you're looking down at it. Mm-hmm. It collapsed to that, and then I forget what it failed at. Like, I think I ran out of stroke on the machine I was using. It was a pretty big machine, too, just because of rope stretch. But man,
was he doing? Did you have a safety knot tied in it?
Nope, no.
Oh,
but it would have been. It wouldn't have mattered. The portion that slipped was one of the inside legs, and I'd have to go back and look at my video and see. But it was really, man, it really opened my eyes to that. And so I had Mike Forbes, who was on the podcast earlier, a couple episodes ago. He also helped me with that test, and he did some stuff in 8 mil cordage, and he for my IDERS presentation, and he called me one day. He's like, "Hey, dude, like, I got something funny to show you. Tell me if you're seeing this too." So it was just very odd to me that for me, the Portuguese bowline and both the 11 mil HTP that we were using, as well as the 8 mil Sterling Aztec cordage, it always slid towards whatever anchor did not have the tail, or whatever side of the knot did not have the tail coming out of it, which was mind blowing to me. I would love to do some more tests. So I don't know, maybe at the instructor meeting coming up, huh? So,
if they let us in the building.
If they let us in.
Oh, that's right. All right. Well, we've got a couple pickup trucks and pull like hell. I don't know. So
hey, that works for IDERS.
Yeah.
I mean, it's backyard first lick testing. Isn't that what everybody always says?
Well, this in particular individual did some very. It was interesting. I'll dig through my paperwork and see if I can find it for you. It's good humor reading.
That'd be interesting, because when I look for any testing done on anything other than just the regular old bowline, what everybody calls a standard bowline, that I could find nothing. So there was no published data out there, minimum break strength wise. I guess just to define, what do you got in there? What are you drinking there, LeRoy? Anything adult?
No, it's water.
Oh,
I was teaching class, so this is water.
Okay. Sorry about that. Boring. So I mean, it's no cherry funnel cake sour, but we'll forgive it. So
thank God.
So to define a bowline a little bit further, there is a paper that a fella out of Australia put out. His name is Mark Gommers, Gommers.
Mm-hmm.
And the paper is called Analysis of Bowlines. And it is a 77-page paper on bowlines. And it defines bowlines, interestingly. And I used his paper. I referenced it in my IDERS presentation and gave him credit for it. Bowlines have a fixed eye loop. They have a nipping loop, like the little round turn you see, and then like a collar around the standing part, and usually a parallel strands of rope going into the nipping turn. And the International Guild of Knot Tiers, which they're not even rescue people, they're just knot nerds. IGKT.dent if you're ever really, looking for bowline in depth. I think they have 150 names for like 87 different bowlines or something. Like, all of those bowlines have three things in common. It's that fixed eye loop, the nipping turn, and the parallel bands going through the nipping turn and the collar. So what was interesting though was his paper mentioned that the Gommers paper mentioned that minimum breaking strength is not really a great metric for knots, and that security and stability were should be the ideal features of a good knot. But in all those 77 pages, he never defined it. So, you guys know about the testing side of things more than I do. Is there a test for cyclic loading? Is there a standard cyclic loading test? Because I did cyclic loading tests, and they were totally inconclusive. Not a single tail creep through. But is there a standard test for knots for cyclic loading? John, you're the standards guy. Do you know of one?
Not that I could recall, no.
Wayne or LeRoy?
No.
I'm trying to think. I mean, other than referencing testing methodology that's been done in the past.
Sure.
And I think that was, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but that water knot testing, wasn't that just an arbitrary 250-pound number that he came up with?
When
When Tom
Moyer did the testing. Yeah, he just came up with a round number. That was before the ASTM standard masses, I think.
Yeah.
And instead of going with 220 or 100 kilos, why he picked 250, I don't know, but it may have been that was easy for his test machine or something like that. I have no idea. But if you figure, a guy wearing a pack or something like that, although most people aren't ascending ropes with big heavy packs, but
sure,
I think it was pretty arbitrary.
Yeah, some of us are larger than the average bear, but when I did my cyclic loading, I pulled all the Bowlines that I tested. I tested a bunch to failure, but I cyclic loaded them 250 pounds 10 times, 500, 1,000, and 2,000 pounds. Each of those 10 times on the same knot. And if you just hand tightened the knot, like tied the knot, pulled it snug, and then went ahead and did a cyclic load test, and it was a pretty fast test. It did not meet any slow pull standards. I did it with an Amcus ram, hydraulic, car cutting ram. Nothing happened. Like there was no slippage. There was no nothing. I think what the security and stability point is maybe more for climbers, like where they don't load it at all and are climbing around all day. So I definitely think a climbing knot is different than a rope rescue knot. Would you guys agree or disagree on that? No,
definitely, because like you said, if the climber uses it on their harness, they're tying lots of times through the harness and not connecting, using a carabiner or anything.
Sure.
But it's not loaded. And the other thing is it's getting bounced around a lot. Yeah. It's rubbing, because it's on their belly. It might be rubbing against their face or something like that. And I think that was one reason why they kind of always went to a figure eight. But
yeah, I mean, I probably would too if I was never going to load it. I think I might be inclined to that as well. But
now I will tell you this anecdotally, because I've only had it happen once. And it was in a class I was doing it was an industrial contract class, and they used a bowline on a coil on the belay line, like we would normally do, right? So they have a vertical litter rig, so that's what we were using, and then they did a bowline on a coil at the head of the litter for their belay line, and I reminded him, I said, just make sure, safety knots, all that kind of stuff. You put a safety knot in. And he did not put a safety knot in. And they were lowering. And the belay line actually wound up lowering slower than the main line. Okay, so they were running twin tension, but they weren't ideally twin loaded, if you will. And by the time the litter got down, thankfully it was only like, 20 or 25 feet, because they were hanging on the belay line. And he did hand tension it just like you did in the test.
Sure.
And the tail, thankfully, was long enough, but he wound up loading the tail and the litter hanging on the belay line kind of wonky crossways.
Yeah. Sure, yeah.
As the tail, and thankfully he had it connected into the guy's harness, cool. So you control the tail or safety knot, right?
Yeah, sure.
But the litter actually wound up hanging at an angle on the belay line.
Really?
Yeah. And it was tied right, because the first thing I did is run down the steps and go and check. It's like, okay, stop right here. I mean, I wasn't worried about the guy falling or anything.
Yeah.
Because, the main line was on the vertical litter bridle.
Sure.
But I kind of looked at it and I'm like, all right, so what just happened? And not having the ability to be able to go, nobody's there shooting video, unfortunately, so we could actually see everything that happened.
Right.
It was a definite eye-opener. They have since obviously remembered the safety knot every day since then.
Yeah, right, sure, no doubt. So, that was interesting. Like I always do. I rig a lot with Bowlines. I always do put a safety knot on there, despite knowing that even if it was hand tied, it's for me. I never saw it slip, but I can especially with that bowline on a coil, man. Like I raise an eyebrow when I see that thing now. Only because of the testing I've done. I would like to do more. That would be pretty interesting to do that. But yeah, I'm definitely a safety guy, and usually I default to the Yosemite safety. and most of the time with a bite too, because I can clip stuff in there to, flex my rigging geek muscle. So interestingly, when I was doing my tests, like I don't even have the list of what I tested, but I did a lot of anchor bowlines, which CMC doesn't teach. I learned it from the Ropes at Rescue crew. But again, I never saw any numbers on it until I did it myself. But the bowline with a bite in Yosemite, so you've got a loop around an object, and then you've got a forward-facing bite, like you do the Yosemite with, a fat rabbit gets stuck, instead of the rabbit coming up out of the hole, it's a fat rabbit. And you do the Yosemite with that. So you got a loop around the object, your anchor, and then a forward-facing bite that you can, anchor off to. Those knots, I think I did 3 variations of that when I tested. All of them tested, break strength-wise, were higher breaking strength than the unknotted breaking strength of the rope. So I was using 7,000 pound-ish Sterling HTP that Matt Hunt at Sterling gave me for this test. And I was getting 9,000 pound numbers when I did a triple bowl. And so, 2 loops around the anchor. I was like in 11,000 pound range with 7,000 pound rope. It was, it makes sense. Like you're loading 2 strands going into the knot instead of 1. You got a couple more strands around the anchor. But what was really most interesting to me was that I don't think it's a bowline anymore, right? So if a bowline is defined, and I don't know who has to agree or not, but as a fixed loop, a nipping turn, and then that collar, when you load that forward bite, you're not loading the nipping turn anymore. It's the same reason a sheet bend or a Beckett bend and a bowline are not the same. But I think it stops being a bowline at that point. It looks like one, but you're loading it differently. Has anybody put that thought into it, or just don't give a flying hoot?
Well, no, but I haven't
thought about it that much, but I still care.
Yeah, I haven't put much thought into it, Kelly, but when I look at your paper and you have those 3 points that make something a bowline,
yeah,
obviously, yes, by that alone, you are right.
Yeah, again, I'm not the one who defines it. You're definitely right. It definitely looks like a bowline, and I'm just taking information from that Gommers paper. But one thing I have been able to do that's really weird, if you only load one side of the bowline, like the tail side again, and pull on that forward-facing bite, like you can pull the standing end through that knot like every single time. It's like it's a party trick for the 5 people who care about it, but it is really interesting the way that knot loads. And actually, we just had a class where I work. Somebody loaded it might have been a Portuguese, kind of funky, and man, it just kept extending outward until it sought its equalization, and that was again a real eye opener for guys. So, or bowling on a coil, whatever you want to call it. That one in particular, I think it definitely needs more looking at. That bowling on a coil weirds me out. So, again, maybe something to look at in the future. But the fact that those, loading a forward-facing bite is like, I don't know, not quite 1.5 times stronger, maybe pretty close to the unknotted breaking strength of the rope. Super interesting result to me. Like I had no idea where it was going to go. Used it a bunch, hung on it a bunch, but holy cow! If it would have broken it, half of the strength, I'd have been crying my eyes out, because I've taught that stuff to a lot of people, So, all right, are bowlines safe enough for rope rescue? LeRoy's exact words when we talked about it were, "I don't care," last week, but I think you care a little. You've said enough to care a little.
Well, here's the thing. Whatever organizationally, I think it does come down to an organizational or a personal decision, right?
Sure, yeah.
And as long as people, and it's no different than the T versus G argument, or I use this for that, or whatever. It comes down to me, it's a personal preference.
Right.
And as long as everybody knows, understands, looks at it, it's tied correctly.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of know your equipment and how to use it, and then know what its limitations are at the same time, and then apply appropriately.
I agree. And interestingly, that, I forget how many years ago it was, I took a class with Kirk Mothner, and he said pretty much the same thing. Like, I said, hey, are you cool with the bowl? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine with it. Like, is everybody on your team fine with it? Like, if you tied that, would everybody on your team know what you've tied? And I lied and told him yes, but no, I said no, probably not. Most of the guys wouldn't know.
I don't think in most cases. Obviously, it depends on the team, but thinking to current crop of trainees or more recent people that we've trained, because at CMC we're not teaching bowlines.
Right.
It comes up sometimes if somebody asks, we talk about it. But if somebody were to tie a bowline in a class because they knew it from before, I'm sure that many of the students in the class wouldn't know it. And then taking that further, even in more advanced class or more experienced rescuers, if all they've been taught is this is what we always tie, and it's a figure eight, and this is the reason why, I'm not sure they'd know, or if they knew, would be comfortable with a bowline.
Maybe not, but I mean, for me, I always thought that I enjoyed taking other classes and seeing that perspective. Otherwise, like I was excited when I learned the bowline, because all I ever did know was the 8. So like I can see the benefit of tying an 8 so everybody knows it. I can also see the tremendous benefit of teaching people the bowline, just because it might be new to them, and you got to up your level at some point. So I mean,
I think this is where testing comes in, right? I mean, if you've done testing, and this is where I think, in my opinion, where standardized testing is a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. So I can do my results in my garage, or my testing in my garage, and come up with what you did by using the same speed rams and all that kind of stuff. That's where it truly matters. And if you have vetted that stuff, and your organization is comfortable with it, I say go with it.
Now, you know what? That's a good point, and I think that's. I mean, we've referenced eiders a bunch on previous podcasts and this one, but man, like the fact that people are out there at least attempting to validate what they're looking at and doing is pretty cool. And but Bowlines was it for me, and I think like I'm definitely comfortable with some of them. I definitely have questions about it.
As long as they're validating against a fixed standard. Reproducible standard, not just something, well, here is how I did it, here is my criteria. It's like, no, it needs to be standardized so that the industry as a whole can measure like for like.
I agree, and I think for me, I didn't give the feet per minute of my ram pulling for my cyclic load because I just don't know it. But I think there needs to be a test for that. Like I think that would be, or I don't know, maybe there doesn't, but why is there not a cyclic load test? If we say things like this knot is bad because if you load it a bunch, it'll pull through. Then same thing with webbing. Why is there not a cyclic load test? Maybe we just don't need another test. But that one seems a pretty obvious one to me. Or the security test, like how many times can you shake a bowline and XYZ rope until it falls out versus an 8? Why is there no test for that? So,
and if you think back, and this kind of goes back to John, the test that we had done with Mike Kuhlmeyer.
Yeah.
That cyclic loading on over that 90-degree edge, with the test masses that we selected were based on NFPA.
Right.
For those cyclic tests. And I mean, the results were surprising, I think, pretty much across the board.
Was that for the escape stuff, or just rope?
No, it was actually rope testing over an edge.
What we were really trying to test was the edge protection, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like, and if you think to like and those that are listening to the podcast who have never been to a class will never get this reference, but it's a Tuesday rig.
Okay.
Okay, so you've got your high point rigged up on a separate rope to 2 independent anchors, your double loop figure 8, hanging over the edge.
Sure.
That your high point change of direction pulleys are hanging off of, and then cyclic loading that segment of rope.
Yep.
Because my concern was and always is whether a guy be ascending, and you take a look at somebody ascending, and I'll pick you, a slightly gravitationally enhanced individual.
How dare you? Take a bite of my cheeseburger. Swallow that anger.
But if you're anchored on a roof, and then that segment of rope is hanging down off over that 90-degree edge as you're working your way up, whether it be over an I-beam with some Edge Pro or over an edge of a building, whatever the flavor of the day is.
Sure.
And then when you think about a Tuesday, that cyclic loading over and over and over and over on that same 2 inches of rope.
Sure, yeah.
What impact does that actually have on the rope strength? And we found out that edge protection mattered. We did find that old retired fire hose actually made it stronger.
Nice.
Stronger. Now, if you talk to Kuhlmeyer, who was an engineer, it was within the standard deviation, and he got kind of spun up when I said, "Look, it makes it stronger." And he goes, "No, it's within the standard deviation. It doesn't have any effect." I go, "No, dude, compare it to this. It does matter. It made it stronger." And he's "You're missing the point."
Yeah.
The point was it was actually really good edge protection, whereas some of the other things like a couple of layers of Cordura, like somebody put in a rope bag and stuff, really weren't very effective.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, that's the ultimate feel good, right? Like, oh shoot, just shove a rope bag under there, we'll be fine. Probably not. So it's emotional comfort more than anything, I suppose, huh?
Yeah, and it wound up being, that was actually worse because you had a feel good that, it's going to work. And after, I think, 10 cycles, it just ate right through the rope.
Yeah, it's
the edge caused the failure. I mean, it chewed through the Edge Pro in like 3 cycles.
Yeah, I can believe that for sure. So, I mean, to have a cyclic load test, be it for a knot or for an edge, there might be an edge one out there, I don't know, but a cyclic load test would be interesting for me. Like, I don't know what the standard is. I mean, really for rescue, that like an actual rescue, what is the cycle? Maybe 2 times, right? Like you're going to load one over the edge, hit the ground, and come back up, right?
That was it, because this was a problem that occurs either, like LeRoy had mentioned earlier, the Tom Moyer testing of the webbing and the water knot, where the webbing was an anchor and the guy was sending the rope, so it was it always had a load on it, but as the climber jugged up the rope, if you will,
sure,
it was kind of surging on the anchor.
Yep.
Or that was a supposition. And we really want to do the edge testing more for training purposes than for real life rescues, because like you said, how many cycles are you going to do in a real rescue? Maybe 1, maybe 2.
Right, sure.
And that's it. Whereas in training, we might be doing a couple dozen cycles.
Yep.
And that's where the problems had come up in the past, where we had sawn through ropes and things like that.
Cool. That's, well, I think... in my spare time, I'll develop a cyclic load test and put it out for the world. And
I mean, if you want to write a test, be my guest. It's like we talked about the load that Tom put on. He goes, okay, well, the machine had a setting for 250 pounds or whatever the reason was. I don't remember why he chose that, but he did, and we went with the NFPA load test, and we just cycled it back and forth because it was easy to build with the hydraulics. And, the rope didn't go that far each time, but it didn't need to, because all it was indicating that rope was shifting or doing some slight elongation or something when it was loaded.
Nah, makes total sense. Cool. Well, I think the answer to our Bowlines safe enough for rope rescue is probably. So, I'm comfortable with them. I use them, often for anchors and the end of the rope. But I think it really is dependent on your team and the training that you're doing, to see if it's good enough for your team. If one guy's tying Bowlines and the rest are tying 8s, then that's bad news. So I think you all have to be on the same page, like Wayne mentioned. So they're definitely strong enough. Do they result in or have a bad cycle? Cyclic loading? I don't think so. But they can be mistied. I did some testing. Even when they're mistied, I don't think the testing I did, even mistied, they were still plenty strong, and they didn't collapse into nothingness. So, I don't know. It's leave it out there for the world to judge. I know as an organization, like as the rescue school, like we only teach the bowling on a coil pretty much. And I mean, that's just years of experience talking there. Is that, I mean, that'd be the general thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not even a traditional bowline on a coil either. The traditional bowline on the coil was literally several wraps of rope around your chest as a belay. And we're kind of doing a bastardization of that when we're using it as a tagline or as an anchor. It's the same knot, but it's not really the same as a coil.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, it is more Portuguese-ish, Portuguese-y. I don't know. So why do we call it the bowline on a coil then?
The first person that started doing it called it that, and nobody else cared enough to find something else, and it stuck. Kind of like a lot of things get named. The first guy names it, nobody changes it.
I care now, but no, we changed this. We changed scaffold knot to poacher's knot, right? Like,
yeah, we did. I don't know what it is when you tie it that way. Is it you know? If you looked at it right close to the bowline part, it's the same as a bowline on a coil, other than that there's one strand going through. But I don't know.
All right, I sense a lot of fighting coming up at the instructors. So.
I know somebody that can give you an opinion on that, but he won't. You know, he's going to be listening to this podcast. I assure you.
Okay, I don't get it. No, I get it. No, I mean, I would argue that it's a Portuguese bowline, but I mean, we can call it a bowline on a coil just to be different.
Well, most of the students I've come across call it a Portuguese bowline if they're savvy with their knots.
Sure.
Hey, that's a Portuguese bowline. Yep.
Yeah. I still tend to default to that because that's what I learned it as. And
well, let's make a quick decision. We're about ready to print a rope rescue manual again.
Oh hell, that's Portuguese bowling, man. That's a non for me. But,
hey, we got 400 changes. What's 402, right? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and the other thing is that what does Ashley's Book of Knots say? Because that is the go-to.
It is. Yes, I don't have mine in front of me. I do have one.
I can't reach mine with my headset on, but I will if you want to.
Yeah. I am. Yeah, I'm darn sure. Yeah, get it out, John. Go reach for it. It's probably.
Well, I know, Kelly, that you referenced Ashley's in your paper as it. Probably
like it's in the
not 1010.
1010 is the like what you would call a standard bowline, just the regular old bowline.
What you put is while it is indeed a bowline, it is not the bowline.
Oh, okay, right, and that's straight out of that Mark Gomer's paper. Like he was very. Insistent that bowlines are a family and not just that one. So, but yeah, I thought I labeled the Portuguese with a number as well, but I'm not seeing it. It's definitely not my presentation. I don't know whether it's in my paper or not.
I mean, you've seen variations inside bowline, outside bowline, all these other other things. Yeah.
True enough. A lot of those have numbers too. Like, that outside bowline is, I call it an outside bowline. I think it's called a cowboy bowline, and there's another name for it in Ashley's too, but I don't know it. But I am about 98% sure that that bowline on a coil that we teach is actually a Portuguese bowline. Again, does it matter? Does the name matter? Yeah, maybe a little. But
if you're a purist, absolutely. Yeah,
I think I don't know if purist suits me, but I'm pretty darn close. I think on that, but only because I looked at it a bunch. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's. I think that will cover it for bowlines. I think the answer is maybe. So for your team, it's could be safe enough. It's like they're definitely safe enough if everybody can tie it and spot it. They're definitely safe enough, strength wise. And if you got to put a safety on them, probably to make them secure. But aside from the Portuguese, like I'm for me, aside from that Portuguese, I'm in on them. Portuguese, I think we need to do some looking. But
I'm looking.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, well let's.
All right, so I'm looking at Ashley's, and they show it as what I learned is not ever as a climber, but from climbers as a bowline on a coil. and then they have the variation of that, which is what we're tying around a litter. And it just says that the loops are splayed instead of being parallel, and it doesn't give it a new name. So
interesting. All right.
It calls it out as, along with the Portuguese bowline and some other things. So
okay, cool. Well then, boy, I guess I'll hustle up and do some research before the new manual comes out. So cool. Thanks for looking that up. I should have had my book here.
That's right.
I thought I had it all in my head, but apparently not. Cool. Well, I guess that's.
Well, you're right. Is what I'm saying is that what you're thinking is correct. It shows it that way in a couple different places. So
okay. I mean, then my vote is to change it in the upcoming manual. So
yeah, and just for kicks and giggles, I'll see if there's bowline on a coil in here. They may come up something else or something different. But
yeah, the bowline on a coil I always learned is like 3 loops around, like you did it around your waist and then pulled 1 loop down under you like a bosun's chair, and then 2 around your waist. But it looked similar. It was an actual coil, like you looped around 3 times before you did your.
Yeah, well, that was what we did. It was 3 times around your chest, and that was your belay. And the idea was that it was a wider points of contact around your body, and it didn't cinch down on you. But,
okay. I learned it around the waist, and you pull 1 down below your legs as a seat, and 2 acted as a waist strap. But it was definitely a coiled rope. Like it wasn't, just a single strand around 2 anchors. So.
Yeah, well, in Ashley's index, it doesn't even call out a bowline on a coil. So.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, I'm gonna have to go back and hit my Ashley's. I'll eat dinner later, honey. I'm gonna look at Ashley's right now. Got things to do. All right. Cool. I think our bowline safe enough for rope rescue. The short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is maybe. And please refer to the previous 45 minutes discussing it, which is probably about 42 minutes longer than a couple of us on here thought it might go. But here we are at 45 and a half minutes discussing the bowline. So cool. I appreciate it. And we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks,
All right.
Kelly.
Good. Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yep.